Welcome everybody to this seminar today by Joan Perelló. It's a great pleasure to come today with Joan. Joan is a chemist by training. He is also a professor of analytical and clinical chemistry in the University of the Balearic Islands. So many of you may know Mallorca, so that's a place, and there is good science happening in Mallorca. And an example of that is what Joan is doing and what has been doing in the latest 15 years of his life. So for 15 years, he's been working on the biotech side, startup biotech side, growing up the company to a point where the company develops a drug that is ready to enter now into commercialization. It has passed all the clinical trials, and then taking it from the pre-clinical phase, just a research project, and advancing that all the way through the regulatory path, growing a company from the scratch. He raised 140 million. He sold the company the first time, I would say, for nearly 400 million upfront payments. Then you have other payments. And he showed us the lead, how to do this way. So he's been having managerial positions all throughout this path, at all type of different positions. And he is currently CEO. Well, he was the CEO and co-founder of the Sanifit, which is the company that they built to advance this molecule that is effective in very, let's say, serious cardiac disease or cardiac condition. And he's not only that, he's also an influential person. He is the chairman of the board of a company today called Crystal Engineering, which has business on another topic, not the cardiac disease, but of other topics more to be with health in general. He's also president of the Balearic Cluster of Biotechnology and Biomedicine, and he is vice dean of the Official College of Chemists in the Balearic Islands. And he has been working as consultant, and he is very much available to people that is interested in this entrepreneurship path. So it is a real pleasure to count with him today at COG. So, Joan, the floor is yours. We are eager to hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Noel, for the kind introduction. Simon, if you can pull the slides, we'll follow those to go through the story. If it doesn't work, I can share slides as well, whatever you prefer. You're on mute, Simon. We cannot hear you.
It may be better for you to share the slides just from a control point of view.
Okay, let me try.
Yeah,
okay,
perfect.
Do you see the deck full screen?
Yes, we can. Great.
Okay, great. So, well, first, again, thanks, Annabelle, for the kind introduction, and I'll go through the adventure of being a biotech entrepreneur, and I hope that you find the story interesting and that it serves at least to to be a bit eye-opening, because sometimes the stories in the way they are told are not exactly in the way they happen. So in the first slide, I put how I think the world saw our story. That was Bernard and I when we were a bit younger than today. We had the long hair, started the company when we were 25. I was actually finishing my PhD that same year. And as you can imagine, running a biotech company is not running another type of company. Normally, you don't generate sales. You need huge investments. It's long periods of development until you have something valuable that someone would be willing to take on and commercialize or further develop, or whatever the specific biotech model is. So, convincing people about funding your company takes effort. And if your face looks like my face when I was 25, that's not exactly easy. And especially if you're based in Mallorca, because Bernat and I were the two chemists doing science. People thought probably on the beach. They did not even think that there were labs in Mallorca. And in a moment where, not in Mallorca, in Spain in general, there was not a big culture in terms of not entrepreneurship, but in terms of investing in these type of stories. When you were talking to generalist investors, you were getting the questions basically, how much are you selling right now? Well, how much? I'm not selling anything. I'm selling a story and hope that you will fund into this story, and we'll see. But after that, we raised some seed financing, Series A financing, and we were not, other than in our region, the company was not known at all. And it was mostly large financings, which were normally linked to data, but data was not what was driving the message and how we were seen from the outside world. It was basically the big financings. So in 2015, we raised around 36 million. We had completed phase 1 trials by then, and the objective was to start a couple of phase 2 studies. And that put us on the spot. We appeared in all the biotech, international life sciences publications. And then we were the company in Spain, in Mallorca, that had raised a lot of money. People did not even know what we were doing, but we had raised a lot of money. And that's how people see success and failure from the outside world. Then, as many biotech companies, you go into silent mode, you do what you have to do. And a few years later, we raised what's still today the largest financing in Spain in the life science sector. That was another piece of great news. Okay, Sanifit was still alive. They were still there. Another great financing. So another great success story. This is how stories are told. You raise a lot of money, you sell your company for a lot of money. Great. And then a couple of years later, as Annabelle said, we were acquired by Vifor, which is the largest acquisition of a biotech company in Spain. The largest acquisition of a biotech company. Okay, again, this is how stories are told. Well, I can tell you that this slide is not even close to the reality that I have been living at Sanifit. This is fine. This puts you on the spot for 24 hours every 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, and that's it. And then you disappear and do what you have to do. So if you're thinking of running a company, or if you already have a project, this might happen. I wish to you that this would happen, because we need not great stories, but great projects to cure diseases for patients, or improve diagnostic for patients, or have better devices for patients. So I wish that you live stories like this, but this is not the day-to-day, as I said, not even by far. So I'm going to use the same slide, and in a summarized way, because Simon said that I would have 20 minutes with flexibility. I will need the flexibility, Simon, because it will be a summarized version of the story, but I don't think I can make it in just 25 minutes. So the first decade over 20 years in order to get... I'm sorry?
Sorry, I mute.
Okay. So until we had a drug in the clinic, it took over 10 years. So you can imagine how difficult was that. But the first question for me, for an entrepreneur, is why do you want to start a project like this? So for us, it was a bit the story that you have in this first slide. This is one of the slides that I've been using over these 15 or 20 years. My company, Sanifit, was working in what's called calcification disorders. Basically, that means that you have calcium in the body, and this calcium should be doing the right thing, which is building our bones and our teeth, and shouldn't be doing the wrong thing, which is depositing in the wrong places, forming what we call pathological calcifications. So when this happens, when this pathological calcification happens, there's always an underlying disease, and there are close to 40 diseases that are connected to pathological calcifications, to the wrong deposition of calcium in the wrong places, and that those are normally rare diseases. Not all of them, but over half of these, up to 40 diseases, are rare diseases, and most of them are unmet medical needs. I have reminded my team that from the beginning to the day we sold the company, the mission statement of the company has not changed at all. We were here to cure untreatable diseases, and the reason is that there were patients who were suffering from these unmet medical needs. Nobody was addressing them because, for many reasons, but rare diseases are challenging. Calcium is an inorganic target. It's not the classical organic receptor. So, the type of approach to drug development was different, and there is a need, and we thought that we could have something valuable for patients. But all this decade happens not in an ecosystem like the one we know today, in an ecosystem where basically in Spain, all the venture capital firms that are funding Spanish biotech companies today didn't exist. None of them. So I know that you are from 15 different nationalities, so many of you might not be familiar with the names, but Isios, Columbus, Alta, Asabis, all these Crossroad biotech, all these firms that are the ones giving seed financing or initial financing to these companies, they did not even exist. So the only thing we could do was, first, learning by doing, because we did not even know how to raise money, and second, talk about the data we had and the development plans, and be able to convince people on the back of that. So at the end of the day, financing, all that is very important, but to me, everything is driven by, not everything, but a very important thing, a very important part of the story is driven by data. So we had the slides like the one you see on the right with, animal data, which is what we had during that period, showing that we were able to do what we were supposed to do, which is managing these pathological calcifications and preventing these calcifications from happening. So things are not always straightforward, and the way is not always a straight line. So in this period between 2010 and 2014, we were preparing a financing. It was supposed to be our Series B, around 25 million financing. We had a potential lead investor who was interested in making a proposal to fund the next chapter of the company, and everything we had, which was data, fell apart because we conducted one animal experiment, and that specific one, which was a killer experiment that the investor had requested, didn't work. So that was a challenging moment that happened around 2012. And this is the first time that we have to go through restructuring of the company. We were 13 employees by then. We went down from 13 to 2 employees. I had to fire my own brother, one of my best friends. I fired my other co-founder. My co-founder fired me, even though both of us kept working for over 12 hours a day, but we were outside the company, not employees anymore, and shareholders of something that was worth not much after the failure of data. So this is what happens during the way. But as I said before, data drives many of the decisions, and you just need to be driven by science and do the right thing. And if the right thing is killing the project, kill the project. And the sooner you kill it, if it's the right thing, the better for everyone. And if it's worth continuing, then do it. So long story short, there was some scientific pitfall in that experiment. We repeated the experiment with another approach, solving the mistakes in the design, and then we got data, which is actually the first graph that you see in this slide, up to 85% efficacy of the compound, and on the back of that, we were able to continue, not to raise millions and millions on the back of that, because that was by then a story of failure. Everybody knew that the company from Mallorca had failed with the science. So now how you turn a negative story into a positive story. So this is not the only thing we were doing by then. We had, we're not very focused. We had some activities in diagnostics. We had some activities in medtech. We had some activities in consumer health. So not only we had negative data in our core activity, but we were doing many things here and there. So this is actually the moment in late 2012 when I became the CEO of the company. I had been responsible for science, and actually all the funding had come through me, but I was not the CEO. There was 3 CEOs preceding me, and I took over at that moment. Remember, I was not an employee, so I was the cheapest CEO they could find, and that was the case for around 14 months. So what we did during that period was we looked at our consumer health and diagnostic activities, and we out-licensed those programs. First, that was not an easy decision, and second, once decided, it was not an easy to execute decision, because go and out-license your technology and get money out of that. If it was that easy, everyone would do it. But we took our consumer health project and sold it to GSK. By then, the company was, as I told you, 2 employees. We did not even have the money to pay the bills. GSK gave us like $500,000 upfront, which was enough to pay all the pending invoices by then, and at least being able to continue. We had the second project in diagnostics, which we out-licensed to another entrepreneur in Spain, and that was the science that was the origin of Vifor. Maybe some of you are familiar with that company, Vifor, which is a successful story in diagnostics, and now they have some other products in the market that started with the technology that we out-licensed in that period. That was a couple of good news, and especially the deal with GSK, that we could tell to investors and start turning a negative mood, negative story into a positive story. And also during that period, we had our medtech division, and we spun out that division. That's also very easy to say, but creating a spin-off company from your own spin-off company, understanding how that works, what's the divisional balance sheet, how to fund separately that other company, because that other company will require funds in order to continue. Find the management team, find the CEO for that company. That was a separate adventure in itself, a adventure that finished into winding down that company. That project didn't work. It continued for 7-8 years, and we didn't get to the finish line. But you learn a lot by having to face these, type of corporate transactions that, as a scientist, nobody tells you. You can, of course, take, specific training, but this is, as you can imagine, this was not my background. But after that, we ended up convincing with some of these positive stories and refocused the story. Now we were super focused on therapeutics development of our drug for calcification related pathologies. Then we raised a Series B in 2014. So in 18 months, we turned a negative story into a successful spin-out, 2 successful licenses, and 3.6 million of financing, which was enough to put our drug into the clinic, start phase 1 clinical trials. And once you're in the clinic, you get a lot of visibility. It's different. There are so many companies in preclinical, and just the fact that you can say now we're in the clinic, that makes a huge difference. For me, that was important, and I put a lot of pressure on the team by then, the team of 2 people that I had, and I remember it was Christmas 2013, and we wanted to file the IND in the UK, because we ran our phase 1 first in man trial in the UK before year end, because I knew that if that happened, this would put us in a situation where we could raise money, and we didn't have the funds to run the phase 1. So even if the filing was successful and the MHRA, the British Medicines Agency, would have allowed the trial, we didn't have the money. But at least I could say that we had the approval, and then something else to tell to investors. So we put a lot of pressure on the very small limited team. We didn't get there before year end, but we filed the 2nd or the 3rd day of January. So the pressure was worth. And that same year, in June or July, we raised this Series B of 3 million to run phase 1, because the MHRA in 32 days allowed the clinical trial. So then we could tell the story. Then we were known. The same day that I was signing the Series B, I was at the notary. I got an email, because information, is known. I got the mail from our lead Series C investor, the one that helped us raise this 36 million financing for our phase 2 clinical trials the same day. So I was signing the small financing of 3 million, and that day I got this message for a potential follow-on financing. So the next year, while we were conducting the phase 1 trials, we were working with Isios Capital and a number of Spanish and international venture capitalists in order to prepare this 36 million financing, which, yes, was a large financing. It was an impressive story, because for all the international non-Spanish VCs, it was their first investment in Spain. None of them had ever invested here, and now they have done 2nd, 3rd, and some of them 4th investments. So, this is one of the things that makes you feel very proud, because you see that you have contributed to paving the way for the sector, not only for your project. And what happened next? That's very important. Celebration, because these press releases that I was showing in the first slide happen once in a while, but these celebrations with the team are very, very important. Don't forget that the way is at least as important as the final outcome. So the second period that I'm highlighting is the period between this raise for Series B and for Series C and the raise for Series D. So in 15, we got the funding to conduct simultaneously 2 phase 2 studies for our lead compound, which is called SNF472. During that period, we initiated and got the readout for one of the 2 trials, which is this slide that you see, that also I have been using for many years now, which is positive data in CUA. CUA, it's the name of the disease. It's calcific uremic arteriolopathy. It's the most devastating disease related to calciphylaxis. It's a disease that I'm sure you have not heard about, but it's more mortal than the vast majority of the cancers. It's a rare disease, but it kills 55% of the patients in the first year after diagnosis. There are no drugs approved, and because it's rare, it's not getting a lot of attention. So we conducted a small trial, and as you can see from the bars, we obtained important improvements in relevant clinical endpoints for these patients. So that was very important, and that was the part of the science that we executed during that period. But executing the science, again, it's very easy to say and not so easy to execute. So we realized that we were in Mallorca and that we were a very small team. And now we needed to run two phase 2 clinical trials with all the infrastructure that you need to do that. And even though the biotech model can be virtual, and with a small team, you can do many things because you can outsource many activities, you need the key people, the key brains inside. So the very important thing by then was creating the team and creating a US subsidiary. One of the decisions we had made was moving the company from Palma to Barcelona. That was a decision by our board. It was, I have to say, a bit controversial because you have your origins, and some investors were in favor, some others were not, but we needed to grow. We couldn't find the right people in Palma, and thought that in Barcelona we could find these people. During the period that we agreed to have in between moving the company to Barcelona and actually moving the company to Barcelona, I met a guy whose name is Preston, who had run the only prior calcification program at Amgen. And actually it was one of my investors who learned about him. So I connected to him. I don't even remember how, because probably LinkedIn was not that much used by then. So I connected to him, and we had a conversation, and my plan was to bring him to our board so he could provide some clinical development expertise, and specifically in an area like calcification where there was no experience out there. As we were talking, and we could see how important that was for patients, how engaged he was with all the calcification story, I ended up saying, and why, instead of joining our board, don't you become our chief medical officer? And he said, well, I will not move to Europe. He was in California. And I replied, I take that as a yes. We will create a US subsidiary with an office in California, with an office in San Diego, and build the team, the clinical team, the regulatory team, and the subsidiary around you. And this is what we did. So this is another adventure on its own, and I could spend more than the 20 minutes that I have just talking about that, what that means, another country, another labor law, another tax law, how to manage double taxation, Spain and US. What does it mean to work at arm's length? So you generate the IP in the place where you want the IP to sit in order to manage the tax implications. All this, which sounds super boring, ends up being critical, as important as the data that you generate, because it's part of how you, in this case, create value for the project and allow the project to move forward. Because if you do it properly, you might attract additional investors to do the next phase and put your drug a bit closer to patients. So when we had this data, we thought that the right next thing would be to IPO the company. If I say anything, any name, any acronym that doesn't look familiar, just stop me and I will clarify. But IPO means taking a company public. We're a private company. We sold the company as a private company, but we tried to take it public, in this case in Euronext, specifically in Brussels. We thought that being a public company would allow us to get access to additional investors, additional sources of capital, and we were, about to start a phase 3 study because we had finished this phase 2. We had another phase 2 study about to read out, so it was at the right moment. So we tried first a number of reverse mergers. Do you know what a reverse merger is? Can you make it like this or like that with your head? You don't know that. So when there is a company, a private company that fails, basically you wind down the company, you close the shop, and that's it. When there is a public company that fails, the ownership of that public company is split amongst all the investors of that company. So when a public company fails, the problem is that you have a shell, you have an empty company because the company doesn't have a project anymore, but has money still in the balance sheet. So what you can do is a merger between a private company that has a project but no money and the public company that has money but no project. And it's called reverse merger because actually the one bringing the project is the private company. And it's a way that has been used for many years to bring private companies to the capital markets through this mechanism. We went through, I think it's up to 6 processes of reverse mergers. And it's always a competitive process because you have other biotechs competing for the same shell, for the same money as you, because everyone has a project and you're competing for the money. And sometimes these things are like, little candies that are there and potentially a fast way to go public. Things are not always so easy and straightforward, but long story short, we tried many times, we didn't succeed. Then we said, okay, we're going to IPO directly, not through a reverse merger, but we're just going to do all the process. So we started hiring the specialized lawyers, the banks. You work with a number of investment banks who help you. They put you in front of the specialized public investors. You do the the waters meetings, you draft your prospectus, which is like the document that becomes public, and you show to all the potential investors in your company. You do all that in order to convince people to put money, but now you're public, which means that everything you do is known and you have to announce to the world. We didn't succeed. I don't have time to go through that. If during the Q&A you ask me, I promise I will respond. But for now, I will say we didn't succeed. And we were getting to the point of cash zero, running out of capital. Yes, with a successful phase 2 study. Yes, with an ongoing phase 2 study that was about to read out. So you would think, yeah, there would be a lot of expectation from investors. We were not even succeeding on that. So in April 19, I was presenting my board a scenario for winding down the company, while I was pushing 200% in parallel to continue fundraising. And we presented that scenario so at least we could understand what an orderly wind down of the company would be and how it would look like and the actions to be taken following a failed IPO process. And in parallel, keep doing what we had been doing for years, which is pitching to investors. And it just happened that in June, we convinced a couple of new investors, 2 new investors, and what was supposed to be the end of the story ended up being still today the largest financing in life sciences in Spain, this 72.2 million Series D. So sometimes, there is a super fine line between what success is and what failure is. And this is why I keep saying that, when something extraordinary happens, celebrate, because the way is at least as important as the outcome, the final outcome. Yeah, you can have a close look at what we were eating. It was not super fancy, but this was the type of thing that we were doing in our little kitchen. And getting to the end, after we raised that Series D, we still didn't have the readout from the second program that happened later in 19. It went pretty well. This slide shows the result from the primary endpoint. The primary endpoint was looking at calcification of the coronary arteries of hemodialysis patients. We're able to reduce by half the degree of calcification in the coronaries of those patients in the primary analysis, which is the one that counts in order to define positive trial, negative trial. That was a great scientific and clinical success. We published that in Circulation, which is the #1 and has been for years the #1 journal in cardiology from the American Heart Association. And on the back of that, we had just raised the Series D, but on the back of that, we said, okay, now this is the moment to raise additional capital. We already had capital to run the phase 3. So we were preparing and about to initiate our phase 3 study, but said this is what they call a catalyst. Let's do the right thing now to IPO the company. Let's try again, but now we will not go public in Europe. Now we will do it in US NASDAQ. You can imagine the outcome because we sold the company as a private company. So we didn't succeed in taking the company public in US NASDAQ. But we contacted the so-called crossover investors. Probably you have not heard about that, but crossover investors are the investors that help you cross from one side to the other side, from being a private company to a public company. And normally, and especially in the US, not so much in Europe, you do what's called a crossover financing before your actual IPO. So you bring in investors who have like a private arm and a public arm, and they help you cross the bridge in order to become a public company. Also, we contacted a number of SPACs. Have you heard about the SPACs? These acronyms. SPACs are also called blank check companies. So those were companies that have existed for many years, but when COVID started, there was an explosion of SPACs. Just Google SPACs, blank check company, and you will find a lot of information. What investors were doing was they were creating a company and put 100 million in the company. That's it. And then they were taking the company public with the promise that they would merge that company with a private company that has a project. So the SPAC was a vehicle that was created intentionally to go through a reverse merger and bring a private company public with 100 million. So during that period, we got a term sheet from one of these SPACs. We got a couple of term sheets from external investors, external crossover investors, and that was following over 100 meetings with different investment firms. Over 100 meetings in order to get 3 term sheets. So you can see that the day-to-day is like failure, getting no's, no. That's the normal thing. What you get normally is a no. And sometimes you get a yes. And when you get a yes, you could think, yeah, celebrate and put one of these other pictures. Well, sometimes the yes is a bit underwhelming because you don't get the investor you wanted. I wanted that other one, and this one is the one sending me the offer, and I don't really like that one because it's not that specialized. Or you have the perfect investor, you like that investor, you know that he will help you because he's able to pull from many other investors. But the value that they put to your company is so low that it would mean that all your old investors would have to accept what's called a down round. So like accepting that now the company, after having succeeded with all your clinical trials, it's worth less than when the clinical trials started. This is what happened. So we decided not to take that path. We had many doubts because when you have a lot of money on the table, in conferences like this, I used to say, when you have the money, just take it. So we had the money and we didn't take it because it was not the right investor or not the right valuation. And it was very hard, but we declined to go down that path. We declined and COVID arrived. So we ended up regretting having made those decisions of declining 3 different proposals from 3 different investors, because, you know, a down round, a miserable valuation, it's still a valuation. COVID, getting out of money and not being able to continue is 0 valuation and nothing for patients. End of the story. So COVID arrived, and we went through some other types of financing. By then, we had been talking for a while with the European Investment Bank. This is a public European level institution, the European Investment Bank, that gives loans to European companies. So they made us a proposal. We had been discussing for a while, and in late March, which was like the first week after the first lockdown due to COVID, late March 2020, they made us an offer for a 20 million debt facility. That was like the easiest board meeting that I had with my investors. It took me 3 seconds to convince them. Said, I have this term sheet, which I recommend to accept this 20 million debt facility. Yes, unanimous, go ahead, get it done as soon as you can, because we don't know what will happen with this thing called COVID. And now we know what happened, but in 2020, we didn't know what would happen, if that would be an easy thing, a long thing, a short thing. So we did that, and that gave us some, you know, peace of mind, some comfort in order to keep going with, you know, some cash in the bank while we were advancing our phase 3 study. And then started talking to pharmas. We had data from our second phase 3 study. We had an ongoing phase 3 study. We ended up getting a couple of term sheets from Japanese pharmas to extend the clinical trials and the market into Japan, so that they could commercialize the drug in Japan. We didn't take those offers. Again, it was a misalignment between expectations and the actual offer, and we couldn't close the gap to a point that was comfortable enough for everyone. But in this case, it's in many occasions driven by your major investors. So we didn't take that path, and the end of the story was an M&A. But an important message with mergers and acquisitions is that companies are bought, they are not sold. It's not that you want to sell the company and you go and sell it. You put it, hey, for sale, and now you sell it. Things don't happen this way. We were not even aiming to sell the company. In 21, with all these stories that I'm telling you, we had received more offers than we were expecting, and we were, for different reasons, not accepting those offers. And there was a group in this other financing category that you have in the slide below, doing product financing. Again, probably you don't know what product financing is. It's something similar to royalty financing. Probably you don't know what royalty financing is, but that means that someone gives you money because they think that you will sell your drug. And when you sell your drug, part of your sales will go to that group giving you the money. When your drug is already in the market, this model is called royalty financing. When you're not in the market, you're still in development. And in 21, we were just starting our phase 3. It's called product financing, because they still fund part of the development, which has a high degree of risk, and then part of the commercialization, which has a lower degree of risk. So we had a term sheet from a product financing group. So we were ready to finalize our phase 3 and put the drug in the market ourselves. But at the same time, as you do, and you should always do as a biotech entrepreneur, talk to industrial companies, in our case, pharma companies, commercializing therapeutics. And my pitch to them was, we have a drug that can be developed for a couple of indications. One of the indications, it's fully funded all the way through registration. We have an ongoing phase 3. Data will be made available in 23. It's actually close to arrive. We still don't have the phase 3 data. We're expecting the data soon. I would like to start a second phase 3 study for a second indication. For that second program, I don't have the money. And I would like you, Big Pharma, to give us those funds to jointly conduct the second phase 3 study. And then we discuss the type of rights that we give to you in exchange. If we give you one of the markets, the Asian market, the European market, then we talk about that. So we made that pitch and this type of proposal to half a dozen companies. In this case, I cannot name the names, and 2 of them were very interested. One of them was Vifor Pharma and said, we are super interested, but not interested in getting European rights or Asian rights. We want the whole thing. And they ended up making the offer to acquire the company. And this is how things finished as an independent biotech. I'm still the CEO at Sanifit. So they asked me to stay for 1 year. And it's been now almost 1.5 years. So when the 1 year finished, they asked me to stay even a bit more. And I'm happy to do that. I don't know if the phase 3 data will be positive or negative, but would like to see it through the finish line and see if the drug can make it to patients or not. And before I show the last slide, I will remind you once more that when things happen, just celebrate, because the way is at least as important as the final outcome. Few final remarks. The stories are not always as the outside world tells the stories. This has been a bit rushed, more than the 20 minutes that Simon gave me. But I hope that at least you see that, the day-to-day has nothing to do with what the world sees. Always make decisions based on science, based on data. That's the most important thing. Because everything you do has to be for a purpose, and the purpose is not to sell your company, is not to become rich, is to develop therapeutics, diagnostic tools, medical devices for patients. Second, once you have made these decisions internally with your team, with your management, communicate properly with your main investors, shareholders, because it's not your decision, it's a board decision, it's a company decision. So you need to generate alignment and make sure that everyone is on board with what you are proposing. In certain occasions during the way, I failed with this second bullet. It was so obvious to me that that was the right thing to do, that maybe some of the investors did not have the full picture, all the story. I thought that I was transparent, but constant communication, like weekly communication with those giving you the money is important to make sure that they follow the story. You deviate a bit, you tell them, you go back on track, you tell them. And the last one, as I've been saying during this speech, the way is, I think it's actually more important than the final outcome. In this country, as I said, there were no specialized funds, but I didn't have many CEOs to whom I could talk when we started Sanifit. There was no reference point, and now, irrespectively on the outcome at Sanifit, we have contributed to bring in international investors. Many people have learned to do drug development in this country. Some people have already gone and joined other projects, and this is part of this ecosystem. And if you can give back to the ecosystem what the system was not ecosystem gave you at the beginning, I think this is a very important contribution. When we sold Sanifit, investors made money. The university that initiated the technology behind this made quite a lot of money. All the employees at Sanifit were shareholders at the company, what's called stock option holders, and they made some money around that. Many of them, after having sold the company 1.5 years ago, remain in the company and keep pushing this because they buy into, what we are doing, which is we are doing this for patients. We are not doing this for other reasons. If you do the right thing at every moment for the right reason, the rest will come. It takes effort, it takes perseverance, but the rest will come. And with this, I stop more than the 20 minutes. But if Simon and Abel allow, maybe we have some time for some question if you guys want to ask anything.
Thank you so much, Joan. This is really insightful. Thank you for showing the real story, because it's real stories that really penetrate and that really make meaningful communications, right? At the point you were talking about maybe a failure, maybe not a failure. I mean, what I see personally is a story of a vision and perseverance. And this has a lot to do with science. So this tells me, and I'm working on the technology transfer office, but I'm truly convinced that our scientists are people very much prepared to be entrepreneurs, because we are trained to fail in many experiments and still seeing the light of how should it be this made better. And I think that's a lot of the story that you are telling. It's about that. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is about, you were talking about the small team. I want to start with a question while people can raise their hands and ask questions. You were talking about team. I wanted, if you could comment about your partners, the people that made this journey with you. Who are the important clues there? Or what is important clues that we have to take into account when making team in the broader sense? So can you comment on this?
Absolutely. So first, Annabelle, I want to say that I think at CRG, you guys are doing the right thing. First, it's important to do science. This is the way to generate knowledge. Second, the fact that you're already creating spin-offs, that's the model, and this is the way to give an opportunity to the project. And then, projects should follow their path. Our example is just one more story, but every story is different. But at least you are, showing a pathway to scientists, to potential entrepreneurs, and I think that's amazing that this is happening in here. About the team, well, the company was started by Bernard and I, and that was the original team for a number of years. But as soon as we could afford bringing in people, this is what actually ends up making the difference. First, I have to say that the most difficult thing of all this way is not fundraising, is not the science itself, is hiring the right people. This is super difficult. And I would tell you, after having hired dozens and dozens and dozens of people, that it's impossible to know at the moment of hiring if you're right or wrong. We ended up adjusting our way of, bringing people, because there are so many people that are bright and interview so badly, and so many people who are terrible and they interview so well and they shit you during the interviews, and you only discover the reality after a couple of months or 3 months of working together. And if that person is a VP or SVP or C-suite, it's so difficult to let that person go, because then it's your failure, because you hired that people and now you have to justify to your investors why did you make this shitty decision. So this is super difficult. So people tend to say, yeah, surround yourself with people who are better than you. Yes, I think we did that, but I think we got there over the years, and the team that was here, during the last 7-8 years, I would say that was the consequence of learning by doing, failure, successful hire. So some people like, Carol, our chief scientific officer, she joined in 2011. She is based in Catalonia, and she's been here during all this way. She is, probably one of the best hires we had. Our manufacturing vice president. We had a few people before the one that we had in the last years, and the one who's still here responsible for manufacturing. That took a lot of energy. Your finance people are very important, and what you need is not the same during all this way. You can imagine that in 2010 we didn't need the same type of finance team that when you establish a US subsidiary, when you have to manage complex IP and tax related situations across countries, and sometimes the key person is not the top person on the org chart. Sometimes you have, a second line person who's doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and those are like the hidden gems, the diamond in rough that you want to have in your company, and they still cannot shine because you need the right person who's able to communicate appropriately with all the stakeholders. And this is also something that it took me a while to learn. Sometimes you hire people to do stuff, and sometimes you hire people to tell stories. And that also matters. I'll stop here, Annabelle.
Thank you so much. I think we can take questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Don't see many hands raised, but I would say, free to jump in, say your name, and go with your question, please.
See, we've got a few. Maybe Michael, you're first, I think, on the list.
I don't see them. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, Joan. Thanks for a very nice talk. I had a couple of questions. Just one on, so you're working in sort of rare diseases space, and I would say, as my understanding is, general consensus is not a lot of money there. It's hard to get investment. Did you ever find obstacles in trying to convince investors that you're working in rare disease, and how did you overcome that? And the second one would be kind of the operational mechanism now that you've been acquired by Vifor, if I'm saying that right. How does that actually work in terms of operational? Is it still a lot of things that you've done in-house, or do they take on a lot of operational work in that sense?
Thanks, Michael. Two great questions. So for many years, because we didn't know how things would develop, we're actually having two potential programs in development. I said that we were running 2 phase 2s in parallel. One of them was for the ultra-orphan indication, truly orphan, like under 5,000 patients in across Europe, under 5,000 in the US. Yes, and you could think that this is very small in order to make some profit for your investors, but at the same time, when you have small disease, mortal disease like this one, like CUA, and you are first in class and first in indication, so there's absolutely nothing, then your business case depends quite a bit on the expected pricing for the product. Because if the disease is severe, you're first in class, first in indication, your drug will be used if you're successful. And we have not been successful yet. The drug is not in the market, but physicians will use the drug. So everything will be down to what's the price that can be charged for a drug like this. And orphan drugs, as you might be aware, have higher prices than other types of drugs. But in parallel, we always had the pathway and the promise of a second larger program. And this is why I had 2 phase 2s running in parallel, a very small phase 2 and a relatively large phase 2. And the second one that I showed you was approximately 300 patients. 300 patients for a phase 2 trial, it's enormous. There are many phase 3 trials that are even smaller than that. So there was like, an expectation that we launch first with the orphan, and then there will be some extension to something bigger. Operating model with Vifor. This is another experience on its own. Again, just Google a bit and you will see that after Vifor acquired us, 3 weeks later, it is announced that CSL will acquire Vifor. So a company of 2,500 employees acquires us, and then a company of 30,000 employees acquires Vifor. So it's not that an integration and transition like this one is difficult. It's integration and transition after integration and transition. So right now we have an operating model which is just the transition of the final end, because Sanifit still exists as a legal entity. As I said, a lot of the team is still here, but now the development, marketing, sales team, because now it's many teams, because this is pre-commercial, is a hybrid team. There are people from Sanifit, people from Vifor, people from CSL, and at the end, everyone is people from CSL, because the final acquirer is CSL, so they are the ones owning the whole thing. But we have the legacy knowledge from the team, and people like the ones I mentioned before still are part of the core team, but we have brought in what they call strategy teams, people from the different organizations, in order to first spread the knowledge across the company. So if people end up leaving at some point, which naturally would happen, some people would leave, some people would like the big pharma story and just continue. Certainly not me. I'm not a big pharma person, but I'm there as my own transition. At least we are able to help CSL to do to get all the information which doesn't sit in a cloud, but it sits in the brains of people appropriately, with a long transition period and interacting with all the team members, while the drug gets data and hopefully gets closer to approval. But this is not easy. This is not easy.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Then now I see the hands. I see a question by Ariadna. So let me just, because Ariadna, I know her, she's from the CSG. So let me just introduce very briefly Ariadna. Ariadna finished her PhD not that long ago, and in the meantime, she is co-founder of a new spin-off from CSG that it was actually incorporated in July 2022, and it will be announced in short. Ariadna, you have a question, go ahead.
Hello, Joan, and thanks for the talk, and thanks, Anna, for the introduction. I've seen your amazing journey and also the journey of Sanifit, and I can recognize that there are a lot of moments of uncertainty. And I wanted to know, how did you manage these moments? And if you can share some tips or how to do that.
Well, the first thing I can say, Ariadna, is congratulations. I think this is a big move. And we would need many Ariadnas in the world. Second, if you need anything, just give me a call. That's a true offer. I wish I would have had people to whom I could have called just to ask questions like the one you're asking, because sometimes you feel beat on your own. So I can tell you that I don't know, I've been facing things differently over time, because as things go by, you just put the thick skin, and it's not the same when I had to fire my brother. Still, now when I think about that, I get emotional, and I'm a super emotional person, but the way I faced things by then, like 11 years ago, maybe was a bit different from when we had to pull our IPO in 2019 and we were thinking of really winding down the company. We had gone through so much shit during the way that, okay, you do it, you don't want that to happen, because this is your company, it's your baby, it's your drug, it's for a reason, for a purpose that goes beyond you. But what can you do? If you have the data and you cannot convince people, then at some point decisions need to be made. So that's not an easy question to answer. But over time, you will be surrounded by different people. As I said, some people have been surrounding, this story for many years, and those end up being, not only your employees, but probably your best friends. So you will have different people around you during time that will help you face these moments. Some of them will be employees, some of them will be investors, some of them will be your relatives. I don't know the type of relationship that you have. You have brothers or sisters, but you just go through that. What I can say is that one of the disadvantages of Sanifit, which was supposed disadvantages, which was being in Mallorca. So Spain is the periphery of Europe. Mallorca is the periphery of the periphery. It's impossible to make science and succeed from there. Well, the fact that I couldn't hire certain people from Mallorca made me hire people from Madrid, from Barcelona, and they were commuting. And then in one of these crises, I didn't say that, but I moved my family to Minorca. The place where I'm talking now, this is my house in Minorca. So in order to go to work, I have to commute to Mallorca. So what happens is that when we are at the office, we are all expats. I am not at home. My CSO is not at home. My VP of manufacturing is not at home. The general counsel of the company was at home, but was not married, didn't have kids and all that. So you end up working. Then what do? Okay, we go to dinner, and you have dinner, but you are with your friends who are your colleagues at work at the same time. And when you have success, it's your people. When you have failures, and you saw that you have many failures. Well, today we had 3 no's from investors. You are with them as well. And all this, helps a lot. So your reality probably will be different, but it's been easier to manage over time, because the first time is difficult, second time is easier. And there is a moment when the skin is so thick that, it's more difficult to hurt you. But still, it's good to be emotional and feel, passion for things that you go through.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan. We have another question from Gosia. You want to go ahead? Do you want to introduce yourself also?
Hi, I have a very impressive journey. So it seems to me that the longer you went, the more complicated it got. But I would like to go back to the start, so to 2007, where you managed to raise 1 million before even preclinical, which at that time, it's quite a bit of money. So what was the trick there, being from, small university, relatively, not big research center? And what do you think was the crucial component? Was it the product that was so unique? Was it the cell? What was the trick there, you think?
Now I should give you the magic answer. So you say, wow, that's impressive.
Oh.
No, I think we were not good enough, because we were doing so many things. Remember, I said we were doing diagnostics, medtech. We were doing many things. And if I ever showed our first business plan, I think I would be very ashamed. So I asked my very original investors to have that as a hidden document, because it looks very different from what Sanifit ended up being. But at the beginning, first, our first investors, our first major investor was Caixa Capital Risk, which is the venture capital arm of one of the largest, now the largest bank in Spain. We were their first life science investment. Their first life science investment. They didn't know much about life sciences. Same as us, we didn't know much about life sciences investors. Sometimes I say, if I had known, I would have not even started the company. So we did that because we didn't know. So with them, we got a term sheet, and then some other people joined their term sheet and got this close to 1 million. A lot of that money was not even to do preclinical. It was to, our drug is invisible analytically. It's a small molecule, doesn't have bands in the ultraviolet visible spectrum. You try to quantify it by, mass spectrometry, which is what everyone does. And it's invisible because it doesn't ionize well. So analytics were terrible. And we spent 2.5 years just to go through the analytics. So when people thought that they were giving us 1 million to do preclinical, they gave us 1 million to just burn 1 million in doing the bioanalytics, being able to properly quantify this drug in the body. So, you know, any investor probably today would have said, okay, done, or just figure it out, and once you have it, come back to me. So maybe because there was, you know, not so much expertise, and because, you know, there was this willingness from Kasia to do something for the country and create the startups and contribute to the ecosystem, they helped us in a way that even they didn't know, but that, you know, enabled to create the story. And that's why I super honestly was telling Annabelle, what CRG is doing is amazing, because it just enables stories. It doesn't mean that the stories will be successful in the way the outside world understands successful, but at least, you know, they show you a pathway. So we spent all that money and all these 2.5 years to being able to quantify the compound, doing some other things. We were working in a different indication, not the rare disease that I told you about. And then in 2010, we had to raise a proper Series A in order to actually start preclinical for a different disease, completely different from the one that was the original business plan, which was kidney stones. Nothing to do with CUA, which is this rare disease that I'm talking about.
Thank you so much.
Annabelle, if I could just say something, it's been an amazing presentation, but we need to keep going in that the participants immediately need a bit of a break. So I'm just going to say a quick thanks first and hand back to you, Annabelle. But Joan, just from the participants in the Bio Business School, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you very much. It was and it was just so good to, I guess, see the truth and what the reality behind all the, you know, all the stuff you say. You see in the newspapers, the good stories. So thank you so much for your honesty, and I'm sure you've inspired, and maybe slightly scared the students here, but it was tremendous from my point of view. Thank you so much. Annabelle, back to you, if I may.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I think we just have, so of course, people from the Bio Business School, if you need to break or whatever, you can do so. But if Joan is so, I mean, it's such a privilege to have you here, that if you have time, I would like to allow one more question. So I see just one more hand. This is from Olga. Olga Millán. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly, Olga, and go ahead with your question?
I'm working at the CRG. I'm from the Strategy and Funding Department, and I'm amazed with your presentation, Joan. I have enjoyed it a lot. My question is, now that you have succeeded in such a way and you have learned that much, are you now investing in new startups? Have you changed your view?
Yes and no, but maybe not in the way you think. I'm investing in startups. Yes, I've been doing that for the last 6 or 7 years. I joined this company, Vifor Pharma, which is a drug delivery company working in crystal engineering. And I joined them as a consultant. And then over time, I ended up becoming chairman. And then over time, after becoming chairman, I've been joining the last couple of financing rounds as an investor. Not big money, but just putting not only my time but also some resources to help other companies, other entrepreneurs in doing this. So don't think that my financial contribution is the story here. I think the story is if I was able to learn something through the Sanifit story, just share that with other entrepreneurs. I think it's the right thing to do, and that's why I joined Vifor and doing that. It's not yet announced, but I've been helping another company behind the scenes for the last months. And actually tomorrow, I'm going to become chairman of another French company. It's in medtech, by the way, and because I learned through failure a few things about the medtech. So some of the investors that told me no during the way, called me to help that other company, and tomorrow I'm becoming chairman. So I have not invested in the company, but will be devoting a lot of time to them in order to see if I can contribute in a certain way. And then, as we announced a few months ago, I joined Isios Capital, which was one of my investors in our Series C and Series D financing. Not only investors, good friends, and helped us a lot. I joined them as a venture partner to just, first learn a bit how the other side of the table works, how investors work, and second, if I can contribute to, advancing other projects in this country and in other countries, but basically